Hey, what's good, self-direct investors? I hope you're all doing great, and I want to welcome you back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Jordan. I'm the mind behind Make More Capital, and today we're coming at you with This Week in Cannabis News from January 31st to February 6th. Now, before we jump in, if you enjoy this video or you learned something, please just leave a like on it as it really helps out my channel. And then, of course, if you want to learn how to take advantage of this generational investment opportunity, subscribe below so that you don't miss any future videos. And there's plenty of content for you to go back, rewatch, and educate yourself with. I've tried to put all the news and facts in one place so that you can watch episodes over time to learn about the evolution of the industry, identify top companies that you keep seeing pop up, and take advantage whenever you're ready. So we start with this story from Marijuana Moment that highlights that the cannabis banking sponsor Ed Perlmutter says he's in amendment talks with Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer as the House passes cannabis banking reform for the 6th time. And if it wasn't enough to get it passed 5 times, which should have made it become law at some point, the 6th time will hopefully be the charm. And so this obviously comes as members voted 222 to 210 to pass the Manufacturing and Innovation Bill, the AmericaCompetes Act, to which the cannabis banking measure was attached via an amendment on Thursday. And so obviously, while this is positive to see that it was added and approved as an amendment and then voted on and passed, it's ultimately up to what Schumer's going to do, whether he's going to punt it just like he did with the version of SAFE that was added to the NDA. But on top of that, we did get an update from Schumer, as apparently he plans to file cannabis legalization bill in April as top House lawmaker details his own reform plan. So just want to share what Schumer actually said about this. In the coming weeks, we're ramping up our outreach, and we expect to introduce final legislation. Our goal is to do it in April, Schumer said at the New York event, which is in line and well, not necessarily in line with what he said last year. He wanted to see cannabis legalized by April of 2022. That's likely not going to be the case because this bill is garbage and it's going to be dead on arrival. But regardless, he's aiming to release it in April. And then we begin the nationwide push spearheaded by New York to get the federal law done. And as majority leader, I can set priorities. This is a priority for me. So it's at least nice to hear Schumer actually setting a priority to try and get this done for April. And so while this is a nice change from hearing soon for the last 12 months, I'm certainly not getting my hopes up, and I'm choosing to just focus on fundamentals as we long-term investors should, because New Cannabis Ventures reports that cannabis sales did bounce back in key markets in December. So this was nice to see, and we're going to go through them. Some of the Western markets, BDSA provides coverage for the relatively mature markets of Arizona, California, Colorado, Nevada, and Oregon. And in November, growth ranged from negative 14% in Nevada, which was the worst state, to 27% in Arizona compared to a year ago. And so we just go through the highlights, so you can pause to read the whole thing, but I'm just going to read the main parts. As Arizona transitioned to adult use in late January last year, but this is the 9th month that BDSA has included adult use sales, with total cannabis sales grew 26.7% from a year ago and 6% sequentially to 116 million, while medical sales fell 40% from a year ago, but rose 5% from November to 55.1 million. So as we can see, as we were expecting, that December did certainly pick up from November at least. It certainly wasn't a record, but nonetheless, it's good to see that December picked up, because as we typically see that, people do pick up their spending into the holidays. So we move on to California. Sales of 304 million increased 5% from November, which was nice to see, as again, that did beat the previous month as most people spend during the holidays, but declined 3% from a year ago, a substantially slower pace than the steep declines from August to October, and similar to the 4% decline in November. And so again, California is one of the more mature markets, one of the more competitive markets, but nonetheless, good to see Cali sales finish the year off strong with a month-over-month increase. As we move to Colorado, the most mature market in the country and a very strong driver of sales for a population of just 5.7 million, sales of 175 million grew only 1% from November and fell 10% from a year ago. While this rate of growth was worse than the 2% decline in November, it was consistent with October's decline and better than the 12 to 14% declines from July to September. But do keep in mind, last year, the Americans got stimulus checks. This year they didn't. So that was likely a big driver of these peak increases. But nonetheless, again, for a state with a small population, these sales are strong across the board, and nice to see them finish up with a month-over-month increase as well. While Nevada, sadly, the pandemic continues to challenge the Nevada market, which at 64.2 million fell 14% from a year ago and 13% from November. So again, this is likely temporarily due to the circumstances and the lack of travel. But once this ends, if it ever does, and hopefully the honking outside is going to go a long way to make sure that these mandates end across all Western countries, then that will help pick sales back up in Nevada. And lastly, on to Oregon. From the Western and more mature markets, the annual rate of decline expanded in Oregon to 8% as sales increased 3% from November to 88.3 million. But again, as you can see, I think stimulus checks definitely helped the sales last year versus this year. But nice to see that they did finish the year off strong with a month-over-month increase as we head into 2022. Eastern markets, note that BDSA has begun providing data for Florida, Michigan, and Pennsylvania as of January 2021. Florida sales soared 14.7% sequentially to 163.8 million. It's nice to see them finish the year off strong, while Pennsylvania rose 7.7% from November to 108 million. And the strong growth in December is important to the publicly traded stocks that dominate those markets. Still, both both markets experienced small sequential declines from Q3 and Q4, with Florida declining 1% and Pennsylvania dropping 2.3%, while Michigan, which they detailed previously, saw overall sales increase 10% from November to 168 million, up 66% from a year ago. So while there are a lot of mature markets that are seeing sales slow, any of the newly launched adult use markets are definitely still seeing massive growth, which is very positive to see for us investors getting exposure into those states. So Illinois combined adult use sales and medical sales jumped 13.7% in December to 173 million, up 42.7% compared to a year ago. And so obviously you can take a nice look at that chart. Since launching adult use, sales consistently continue to grow, while Maryland, the relatively small Maryland medical-only market as well, continues to struggle to grow with sales of 46.4 million, increasing just 3% from a year ago and 6% sequentially. And so while this is still only a medical-only market, Maryland is planning to put adult use legalization on the ballot for 2022, and nonetheless, good to see them pick up sales and finish strong to end the year with month-over-month increase. Well, lastly, the Massachusetts market is one of the strongest as it set a record in December, with sales of 158 million growing 12% sequentially and 48% from a year ago, the best annual growth since August, which is very consistent with other states that have recently launched their adult use program. Massachusetts a bit earlier, launching in 2018, but nonetheless great to see them set a record and finish the year off strong with a very significant month-over-month increase. So this page will be below if you want to grab it and check it out closer, but also just wanted to reference this one from Michigan.gov as I did not end up pulling the other page, but as we can see, the December total for adult use was 135 million in Michigan, but this is up from 120 million in November. So that's a significant increase. Love to see strong sales out of another newly launched adult use program. And lastly, on to Montana, which just launched their adult use program January 1st of this year, 2022. Montana recreational cannabis sales exceeded 12.8 million for the first month, which is pretty significant out of a state with just, I think, 1.5 million people, very small population. So just to highlight, total January adult use sales were 12.9 million if you round up, according to a sales table posted to Twitter by a Helena independent record reporter and attributed to Montana Department of Revenue figures. The total includes recreational sales of more than 1.5 million during the first 2 days of 2020, the weekend the market launched, while Montana's January medical cannabis sales approached 9.8 million, according to the sales table. And so with those sales, estimated monthly tax revenue from adult use cannabis in their first month saw nearly 2.6 million, far outstripping the 391,000 in tax revenue from medical cannabis, which is obviously taxed at a lower rate. So great job to see this out of Montana, especially in their first month, seeing the progress and the benefits of ending reform. Clearly, they're happy with that decision. So as we move on to this one from Florida, Office of Medical Cannabis use for the last week of January 31st to February 4th, and we can see that 2 dispensaries were opened in this past week, Curaleaf in Largo and Vidacan in West Palm Beach. If we take a look, Florida increased their qualified patient count to 675,957, up from last week, which represents an increase of 6,250 patients, which is even more than we saw last week, which saw a jump of 5,000. So seeing 6,000 patients added, signaling a demand for a safe, non-addictive medical alternative is certainly picking up in Florida. And if we take a look at the sales from January 28th to February 3rd, we can look at the number of milligrams of THC sold, milligrams of CBD sold, and ounces of smokable flower sold. So if you're invested in any MSO in the state, you can check week over week whether they've increased or decreased their market share. And obviously these have been the market share leaders in Florida, these top 5, with Trulieve certainly leading the pack. So on to some tweets. Wanted to share this one from MJStock Trader as New Jersey cannabis regulators meet on February 24th and March 24th. And word is that on February 24th, regulators are likely to approve adult use sales, which would go into effect 30 days later. So 420 New Jersey sales would be an amazing catalyst. Don't stop putting pressure on New Jersey politicians. So obviously this is just hearsay from MJStock Trader, but wanted to share this because obviously this would be better than the incompetence and the constant delaying that we've seen out of New Jersey. While I wanted to share this one from Junglejava, it's awesome to wrap up the week with a massive inflow for the Advisor Shares MSOS ETF. And I'm sure all of you are very happy to see this because obviously as we saw the cash leave it and we saw an increase in price action, especially to end the week, this left us wondering, okay, well, how much money has gone back in? So here are the changes made to the holdings for February 4th, 2022. The cash position has gone from 478,000 to 36.2 million. And so the estimated inflow from Junglejava is about 47.5 million to 48 million. So we love to see that ending off a strong week, especially with news that SAFE did pass in the AmericaCompetes Act. So lastly, but on to the next story. This one comes from Puff Daddy. I did want to share some of these snippets that he shares from Cannacord Genuity. And so useful information on Columbia Care, Cresco Labs, and Curaleaf shareholders. Maybe shareholders can correct any errors if you notice them. But basically, it tells you the state region that they operate in, their population, their exposure, their current facility capacity, number of active stores, and maximum number of permitted stores. So this looks at Columbia Care, Cresco Labs, and Curaleaf. So you can grab this link below if you want to check it out. But he also shared a few others. And so it's the same chart looking at some other MSOs. So this is Green Thumb. Ianthus, I honestly would not touch Ianthus with a 10-foot pole. But again, mostly just sharing this one because it has all the same information for Green Thumb. Plus Jushi, which is a smaller tier 2 US MSO, which really could be a good opportunity at these current valuations, but to be honest, I've not looked at Jushi for a very long time. I've chosen to just focus on the top 5 tier 1 MSOs for the most part because I think they're going to be the safest bets and the best bang for your buck in time. But again, that's not advice, that's just my opinion and why I've put my money where my mouth is. But lastly, they also do have Trulieve as well, so you can check all those links out below if you want to grab it. Notably, they did not have Verano on this, which is a bit strange, but I figured I would share this one, which is a Spaces from Aaron Edelheit, and he spoke to the Chief Investment Officer Aaron Miles about the Verano and Goodness Growth merger with Aaron Miles. And so I did tune into this for a while. It was a good, informative, especially as a Goodness Growth shareholder, which is going to turn into Verano shares. It's an hour and 30 minutes long, so quite lengthy, but he does go into depth, provides a lot of detail, so worth checking out if you want to learn more about Verano. And so also wanted to share this one from ElGuapotron 4000, as cannabis needs to develop an integrated campaign outlining the investment opportunity. Amen to that. An accessible package of video, infographics, articles, and comp tables will not only help attract investors now, but improve knowledge and conviction for new investors who pile in on the way up. And it's just worth noting, if we were to compare senior MSOs to other industries like US staples, US alcohol, and US software, in fact, and then if we were to look at each industry's enterprise value divided by 2021 EBITDA estimates, and then enterprise value divided by 2022, and enterprise value divided by 2023 EBITDA estimates, as we can see that the MSOs, based on all of these future estimates, are trading at the lowest valuations. And just imagine these MSOs were to get the attention, uplist, and start trading at the valuations that US software is trading at. That would be a massive re-rating and increase. So this is a nice visual, wanted to share this. And while this is just another look at the same information, looking at the 2021 EBITDA estimates growth year over year, 2022 EBITDA growth year over year estimates, and 2023, as we can see in light blue, middle blue, and dark blue, senior MSOs certainly have the most potential growth year over year EBITDA numbers, far more than US staples, US alcohol, and US software going forward into 2022 and 2023. So if this doesn't highlight how undervalued these US MSOs are at current market cap valuations, I don't know what does, especially when you consider the future growth that they're going to see in the coming years as one of the fastest emerging markets in the US. And when we consider we've got 6 states about to launch adult use programs in the next few years, which include New Jersey and New York, population of 20 million in those 2 states alone. And then we've got 32 states that can still reform their laws, which will help grow the total addressable market organically over the next decade. On to some MSOs, as Trulieve celebrates statewide retail rebrand in Maryland on February 5th. And so they're hosting a statewide celebration commemorating the rebranding of its Maryland retail locations, formerly branded as Harvest, all now changed to Trulieve already. So on Saturday, February 5th, Trulieve invites registered medical cannabis patients and their caregivers to join the celebration at each retail location across the state. So good job, Trulieve, for continuing to execute, while Columbia Care announces that they've raised some money at a much cheaper cost, closing of US $185 million private placement of 9.5% senior secured first lien notes. So not as low as what Trulieve and Curaleaf have been able to raise at 8%, but still an improvement. So they're happy to announce that it has completed a private placement of $185 million, aggregate principal amount of 9.5% senior secured first lien notes due 2026. And so while this is nice that they're raising debt, it's not equity, so it does not dilute existing shareholders. This non-dilutive financing provides Columbia Care with additional flexibility to continue executing on our strategic growth initiatives, especially in markets like New Jersey, New York, and Virginia, where we're serving a growing number of medical patients and preparing for adult use, which is on the horizon. And so just to add, in connection with the offering, the company has received binding commitment to exchange approximately US $31.7 million of the company's existing debt at 13% due in 2023, pursuant to private agreements in accordance with the trust indenture. And so what that means is, as a result of the note exchange, the company is going to receive aggregate proceeds of $153 million of what's left over after using, the 31.75 of this $185 million to pay off some of that old debt that they had at a higher rate. So obviously this is beneficial for them as they're getting lower debt to pay off more expensive debt in the past, and this will allow them to hopefully make better financial decisions going forward with a better balance sheet. Well, they've also announced that they've opened their first cannabis dispensary in West Virginia. So just want to highlight, Announced Cannabis Williamstown, its first dispensary in West Virginia, and 24th Cannabis nationwide, opened today. And Cannabis Williamstown, located at 76 Thunder Road in Williamstown, is the first of 5 dispensaries that Columbia Care will open in the state this year, with the next 3 locations expected to open in the spring. So good to see Columbia Care taking initiative and trying to expand early on in some of the less competitive markets like West Virginia. While this news comes out of Virginia's Christiansburg Medical Cannabis Facility to open next week. Just to highlight that Green Thumb Industries rebranding the dispensaries as Rise, and all future pharmacies it opens in the state will also go by the name Rise, as before the Abingdon and Salem locations were known as Rise, they were owned by Dharma Pharmaceuticals, an Abingdon-based company that still grows and processes its cannabis products in the town despite being recently bought by Green Thumb, a Chicago-based company. So good to see Green Thumb again continuing to expand and building their presence in Virginia. While wanted to share this one as Pennsylvania issues mandatory recall for hundreds of cannabis products. So not all good news this past week, as this email went out February 4th. And so after finishing this review, the department had determined that certain vaporized medical cannabis products containing some added ingredients have not been approved for inhalation by the U.S. Food and Drug Administration. And so of those involved, the agency posted a document highlighting additives not approved by the FDA. It also released an 18-page document listing all of the products recalled. So it seems like there were a few operators, but the list consists of the manufacturer and the name of the product, and the companies with the most number of products recalled included Curaleaf and Trulieve. And so you can pause to read for a bit more detail in there or grab the link below. But that's unfortunate, but ultimately I don't think that's going to hurt their bottom line too much, but we'll have to wait and see. While lastly, Air Wellness holds hold their fourth quarter and full year 2021 conference call on March 17th, 2022 at 8:30 a.m. And so while we have Green Thumb announcing they'll be going first, and then we have Curaleaf that has moved their date up. Now we have Columbia Care's also announced theirs, and then we have Air Wellness coming on March 17th. So lots of exciting earnings to come out in March, especially so we can reaffirm that these fundamentals are remaining strong with these companies. So in other news, nearly 1 in 10 new Missouri jobs came from medical cannabis industry in 2021. Trade group report finds from Marijuana Moment. So thank you for sharing this, as nearly 1 out of every 10 jobs that were created in Missouri last year came from the state's medical cannabis industry, according to an analysis of state labor data that was released by a trade group on Wednesday. The cannabis sector added almost 7,000 new jobs, which is about 10% of the 77,600 jobs that the Missouri Department of Labor tracked for 2021 overall, the Missouri Medical Cannabis Trade Association said. So great to see this out of Missouri, as again, obviously ending prohibition brings nothing but benefits, like jobs to your citizens, and the sooner you can launch an adult use program, the sooner you're providing more jobs and more tax revenues for those that live in your state. Well, good news out of Mississippi, as the governor did sign into law allowing medical cannabis. While it's almost painful to see that they would use these schmucks for their image, which have nothing to do with Mississippi, we do love to see some of the more red states in the U.S. becoming more friendly with the cannabis plant, as Mississippi is legalizing medical cannabis for people with debilitating conditions such as cancer, AIDS, and sickle cell disease. So good job, Mississippi, for getting this done, as Republican Governor Tate Reeves signed the legislation Wednesday, and it became law immediately. It could be months before the first cannabis dispensaries open, though. So obviously this will take time to develop, but a big victory for the citizens in Mississippi as well. While retailers can start applying for adult use cannabis licenses in Connecticut this Thursday. First applications will open up for retailers, and for just a bit more info.
If you're looking to sell cannabis.
No, you can stop. People will have 90 days to apply, and licenses will be chosen through a lottery process. We're keeping these open for a few months here, so take some time, get the correct documentation. Certainly we want you to make the deadline, but don't feel like there's an advantage to doing it in the first week, Siegel said. So I imagine that's going to bring in a lot of applicants, while the social equity process levels the playing field for those people who have been disproportionately impacted by the war on drugs. And those who have been convicted, who have been arrested for illegal use of cannabis, said Ginny Ray Clay, Interim Executive Director of the Social Equity Council. And for each round of applications, there'll be 2 lotteries that take place. One is a general lottery, and the other is for social equity applicants. So that's a great way to ensure that those impacted by the war on drugs do get an opportunity in Connecticut's new market that should launch later this year, while lawmakers introduce range of bills to legalize cannabis in Tennessee. So just wanted to provide an update on this, as cannabis legislation has been introduced in the Tennessee General Assembly again. Measures range from medicinal decriminalization and legalization of cannabis. So hopefully we'll see an adult use program launched sooner than later in Tennessee. If enacted into law, Tennessee could become the 38th state with some form of legal access to cannabis. And this comes as Tennessee's neighbors to the south, Mississippi, just became the latest state to legalize for adult use. While my House Joint Resolution 742 would create a state constitution to allow medical cannabis in the state of Tennessee. So that's a good start. Hopefully we'll see some progress there, and then it'll snowball from there. So, and in other news from MJ Biz Daily, legal cannabis has added apparently 43.5 billion Canadian dollars to Canada's GDP, reports this. What we love to see is it's more data telling us what we already know, that the pros of ending cannabis prohibition severely outweigh the cons, if there are any cons, as Canada's regulated cannabis industry has contributed 43.5 billion Canadian dollars, or 34.2 billion USD, to the country's gross domestic product between recreational cannabis legalization in 2018 and 2021 in just 3 years, according to new reports. So just imagine the economic boom the US would see if all the states would adopt medical cannabis laws and then launch an adult use program. That estimate by the Deloitte consultancy includes 4.4 billion Canadian of direct GDP contributions such as cannabis industry revenues and operating expenditures such as wages and salaries. The report also cites 29.3 billion Canadian of indirect economic contributions associated with supplier activity arising from the cannabis sector's demand for goods and services such as manufacturing, transportation, financial services, and construction, as well as 9.8 billion Canadian of induced economic contributions, defined as the spending of wages and salaries earned because of cannabis sector activities. While Deloitte estimates that the legal cannabis industry has resulted in 15.1 billion Canadian worth of tax revenue since legalization, including 1 billion in direct taxes, 7.3 billion in indirect taxes, 3.9 billion in induced taxes, and 2.9 billion in sales and excise taxes. While the taxation figures do not include cannabis licensing fees or revenue earned by provincial government cannabis wholesalers, while legal cannabis sustains 151,000 jobs in Canada, which doesn't even make up half of the jobs that U.S. cannabis supplied to Americans in 2021, which was 321,000. So obviously, lots of room for growth in America. But according to Deloitte's estimates in Canada, this includes 43,000 direct jobs, 88.5 thousand indirect jobs, and 19,000 induced jobs. So just highlighting that obviously this doesn't just benefit the cannabis industry, but all the other industries that work with the cannabis industry. So just imagine if all the states in the US would see the opportunity, especially for the tax revenue and the jobs for its citizens, it'd definitely go a long way to help solve a lot of the US's domestic issues that they have right now. And so lastly, just wanted to share this one, summarized nicely by ElGuapotron 4000. This is a must listen if you want to know how Brady, Cobb, a DC lobbyist, sees this all shaking out in the next few months. And so I've not been able to watch this video yet, but the link will be here if you want to check it out. It's an interview with B. Cobb Law and a few other cannabis advocates with Benzinga, but it goes through some of the options that they could see playing out, especially because the Dems haven't done anything. They need a sort of a victory. And so number one, expungement and pardons and decriminalization. Number two, CAOA, which would not happen. That's dead on arrival. But then the next best thing would be SAFE plus more, or States Reform Act. And lastly, something with the HOPE Act mixed in between. And with that said, they give it a 60% chance because politicians are involved. So obviously, while we have been waiting for a long time to see some sort of an action, it does look like the momentum is picking up. And so that is it for today's episode, folks. I want to thank you so much for tuning in, and I really hope you got some value out of it. What did you think of the stories mentioned? Let me know in the comments if you have any questions or suggestions, and I'd be happy to address them. But besides that, if you enjoyed this video, please leave a like on it. Subscribe below if you don't want to miss any future videos, and I will catch you on Wednesday for a midweek update. Have a great weekend, everybody.